Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan. Sir, good to see you. As always, thank you.
Good morning, Leland.
And good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
We'll get to the issue of gun control in a minute. President Trump tweeting this morning that the miss by the FBI was very sad. Rick Scott, the governor, going further, saying that the FBI director should resign over this. You agree?
Well, look, I think, first of all, it's a horrible, horrible tragedy, and your program is showing that. We must make sure our kids are safe in school. But to me, the first thing we need to do, and again, your program highlighted it, there were so many missed warnings here. There were so many red flags, including a very specific tip to the FBI. How did we miss that, and what can we learn from that?
Clearly it was missed. The question, though, is, does this go all the way to the top of the FBI? FBI director should resign, yes or no?
I don't believe the FBI director should resign over this, but the FBI needs to focus on what went wrong. You know, we always talk about people need to speak out. People were speaking out, and yet none of these red flags and warnings were acted upon. Why did that happen? How can we make sure our kids are safe in school?
Well, and that's a serious question. You ask the folks down in Fort Lauderdale, the parents of the dead and the students who survived this, a number of them, and very vocally at times on television, will tell you the way to keep kids safe in school is more gun control. I'm guessing that's something that you're not a fan of.
Well, look, I don't believe the problem is legally owning a firearm. It's who owns it. And how do we keep firearms away from people who are, for example, mentally disturbed like this young man was? To me, that's the focus of where we should be looking right now.
That's an important focus, one to get to in a minute. Back to the issue in terms of whether or not you can legally own some of these firearms, specifically something like an AR-15 that was used in this shooting that this guy was able to buy at 18 years old. Al Hoffman Jr., according to the New York Times, very prominent Republican donor, has given a lot of money. He's given $25,000 to the McConnell Senate Fund, among a lot of other money. He sent out a letter saying, look, I'm not giving any more money until Republicans get on the right side of history on this and start talking seriously about an assault weapons ban. Does that change your calculus at all?
Look, Leland, as I mentioned, I don't believe that the issue is legally owning a firearm, a semi-automatic weapon like an AR-15. It's the focus on who's owning it. And I'll tell you, there's one other issue that never gets talked about in these horrible tragedies, and it's the coarsening of our culture, the promotion of violence, whether it's in movies or videos. This is an issue that I think we have to also look at. It rarely gets talked about. You can almost be ridiculed for talking about violent video games, but I think these are broader cultures that promote violence and, you know, that harden our view of life. And I think that those are also important issues to be looking at as we want to make sure our kids are safe in school. Well,
that's a common thread that you point out, going all the way back to Columbine, of video games and sort of violence and culture, from that through Sandy Hook and now to the situation in Florida. I want to get to the issue of infrastructure. I know this is near and dear to your heart, the president's plan for infrastructure. At the same time, Senate can't get together on an immigration deal, even though virtually every senator says they want to agree on one. Tax reform was almost impossible to get done. You didn't have any bipartisan support for that. And then repeal and replace Obamacare didn't happen. Now we add on to this that the Senate's talking about trying to tackle something, as you point out, as relates to gun control. Why should the American public believe there's any chance of some kind of infrastructure deal?
Well, look, the White House put out principles this past week, and I think it's a good start. But I think there's a lot of bipartisan support potentially for infrastructure. And Leland, let me talk about one area that I know there's a lot of interest on both sides of the aisle, and that's reforming our broken permitting system. You know, we could spend $2 trillion on infrastructure, but if we don't fix a system that now it takes on average, say, 8 years to permit a bridge, 15 years to permit a new runway at the Seattle-Tacoma Airport, took almost 20 years to permit a gold mine in Alaska. If we don't fix this system, We could spend trillions and it would be a waste of money. The good news is...
Forgive me, Senator. It seems like the only bipartisan agreement that ever happens in Washington is to simply spend more money. Anything else, both sides are more than happy to score political points rather than solving problems for the American people.
Well, let me just mention this permitting reform issue again. I think I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans. I have a bill called the Rebuild America Now Act that would streamline our permitting system, get it down to, say, 1.5 to 2 years to permit big infrastructure projects, not 10 years. And for example, we have recently a lot of the building trades, the Laborers International, operators, others have come out saying this is critical to them. Wow. So I think, we got to work hard at it, but I think the permitting reform of our infrastructure system is something that, every mayor, every governor has these nightmare scenarios where it takes a decade to permit something. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I'm going to keep working on it with colleagues on both sides of the aisle.
Well, as you just pointed out, the labor unions are behind it, which makes for interesting alignments for all the talk about how much power the NRA has in Washington. The labor unions have many hundreds of times more dollars spent here in D.C. So we'll see if their help and support of your bill gets it anywhere. Senator, appreciate you being with us, sir.
Thank you, Leland.
All right, thank you.